Mr. Shannon, and also thank you for the organizing committee to invite me to be here among other renowned speakers. So what I'm going to talk about today is the updates, evidences in mechanical ventilation in ARDS. And this is my disclosure, and these are the outlines of my talk today. I'm not going to talk about the alternative or the mechanical ventilation during ECMO. The topics that I'm going to talk about is the tidal volume, plateau pressure, the PEEP, the stress and strain, and also the driving pressure. So this is the typical ARDS lungs that we all familiar with. We know that there is inhomogeneity in terms of the aeration and the diseased lung, whereas consolidation and inflammation, edema happen. There's an area where it's potentially that is normally ventilated, but also at risk for over-distension. Sorry. That area, and the area that is consolidated and could be either open or may not be able to open even with a high pressure. And there's area that could be subjected for the atelic trauma. So the ventilator-based strategies in management of ARDS, we used to adopt what we call the lung protective ventilation strategies to maintain an acceptable range of gas exchanges, both for oxygenation and for carbon dioxide. And why? To avoid the ventilator-induced lung injury. And what we mean by just adequate gas exchange is that we don't aim for a perfect oxygenation or normalize the CO2. We accept a slightly mild to moderate hypoxemia if everything sells okay. And for the CO2 and ventilation, sometimes when we face with a very severe disease, we have to accept the permissive hypercapnia. And these are all the potential of ventilator-induced lung injury. By now, we all know that both the barotrauma and the volutrauma is actually from the over-distension. The barotrauma is a gross air leak outside the alveoli, and the volutrauma is an alveolar injury secondary to the over-distension, just like other causes of acute lung injury. And also, we are also subjective our patients to the recruitment, and the recruitment injury or atelic trauma we set up our ventilator is not properly. And also all of those injury can lead into the biotrauma. We know that this is the zone that could be at risk for the volutrauma when we ventilate the patient with a very big tidal volume. And this is a zone where the atelic trauma could happen if we don't open the lung as much as we can. So we try to ventilate the patients on the deflating limbs of the PV curve, just above the critical closing pressure, and try not to touch into the upper inflection point with a low tidal volume and limited plateau. So when we are talking about the tidal volume and plateau, we are moving from the traditional approach of the big breath that actually is more comfortable than the low tidal volume, and moving from trying to normalize all the gas exchange and to keep as a base balance and patient's comfort toward the more lung protective ventilation, which is a low stretch with limited tidal volume and plateau pressure. So everyone see this study 1,000 times. This is the landmark study, the low tidal volume versus the large tidal volume from the ARDS net, which show a significant mortality reduction in the low tidal volume groups. And even when we look into the systematic review and the meta-analysis, it's been shown that the low tidal volume group has a mortality benefit over the large tidal volumes. But when we look into the details, not everyone who's the small tidal volume not always better than the large tidal volume. It will be better than large tidal volume if those patients who subject to large tidal volume also had an accompanying high plateau pressure, meaning that those patients are the ones who are very severe and the lung mechanics are very poor. But for the group with a large tidal volume, but the plateau pressure is not that high, meaning that less sick patient, the low tidal volume may not convey better than the large tidal volume. Same thing with PEEP. When we're talking about PEEP, we know that if there is some degree of the PEEP, when we subject the lungs to a high pressure, let's say in the middle and the far right, the same level of plateau pressure, if there is some PEEP level, that will be protective and cause less injury to the lungs. And there's a lot of ways to set up the PEEP and or titrate the PEEP, which I'm not going to talk about because Professor Ross is going to talk about this later on. And this is just one example, is to use the P-value truth table. There are about 3-4 large studies about higher and lower P. And this is just one review and meta-analysis, and we can see that actually the higher versus the lower P doesn't show any significant mortality difference, but can improve oxygenation. Another study that looked into the same P trials, which is alveoli, Loves and Express study, actually could demonstrate some mortality benefit in the higher versus the lower P groups, but only in the group with the ARDS, meaning back then was the PF ratio lower than 200. In the less severe ARDS now, meaning that acute lung injury back then, they show no benefit of the higher P above lower P. So what does it mean? It means that maybe the low tidal volume, the higher P, is not for everyone. Maybe one size not fit all. Then what now we have to talk about or think about? Let's talk about the stress and the strain. So the strain is the local deformations, and the stress is the tensions that generated by a force acting on a body. And when we're talking about the lung strain or deformation, we're talking about the volumetric strain or inflated volume scaled to the functional residual capacity or the tidal volume over FRC. The lung stress is the corresponding changes in the transpulmonary pressure or delta transpulmonary pressure. And it also can be calculated as the specific lung elastance times strain. And the specific lung elastance itself is the stress or transpulmonary pressure that develops at the strain of 1, or when the FRC is double. So what structure that involved in the stress and strain is actually the one that embed in the extracellular matrix, which are the collagen fibers and the elastin. So at the FRC, the collagen fibers are in the folding position, while there is some stretching of the elastin already. And at the total lung capacity, when we apply external force to stretch those out, for example, from the big breath of mechanical ventilation, both of the fibers will be stretched out, and the collagen, which has no deformation capacity, will act as a stop length. With the force that applied, the elastic fibers will have a tension and elastic recoil potential to return its shape to the resting position. When we look at one study that they did study in the normal peak lungs, they ventilated the 29 peak lungs with 0 P and ventilated with a various level of the strain, up to 2.5 strain. And it's going to be all dynamic because they haven't added on any P. It's going to be all dynamic strain, or the global strain of up to 2.5. What they can demonstrate is that at the strain level of 1.5, from that onward, the lungs start to increase the lung weight or developing the pulmonary edema. While the pigs that were ventilated with a strain lower than 1.5, the lung weight hasn't changed. And this also just showing the same thing, that with a strain of 1.5 to 2 is actually the critical strain where the lung edema start to develop. And this is the relationship between the stress and the strain. And you can see that there's a certain part that the relationship is linear, and then after that point, it becomes non-linear. And the slope that I draw here is the specific lung elastance, or the stress level at the strain around 1, which in pig's lung is about 5.4 centimeter water, but in human lung it's going to be around 12 to 13.5 centimeter water. So when they divided those pigs into the group that developed lung edema and the group that hasn't developed lung edema, what they found is that the strain in the lung edema group is much higher than the group that has the lung weight hasn't changed. The same thing, however, the specific lung elastance is not different between the two groups, with the lung edema and without lung edema. The transpulmonary pressure as well as the lung elastance from the beginning of the study to the end of the study has increased significantly in the group that developed lung edema. If you notice, the chest wall elastance hasn't changed, and the group of the pigs that had lung edema died more. Or the pig that didn't have lung edema survived toward the end of the study, while the only 2 peaks from the group with a lung edema survive, which is 14% only. So is that all the global strain that matter, or we should look into the components of the strain?